Start us off, Renee.
Okay, great. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome on behalf of PatientWing. I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's webinar, The Power of Partnerships, Leveraging Strategic Relationships to Boost Patient Enrollment. Today's webinar will be recorded and provided to everyone who registered. Today's webinar will feature two speakers. First, I'd like to introduce Chris Cirillo. Chris is a clinical operations professional with over 25 years of progressive experience, from clinical research associate to senior director clinical operations. He's made a career in small to mid-sized pharma, serving as an advisor and leader in design, implementation, and closure of large-scale programs, specifically clinical trials in all phases of development. While thriving in small organizations, it's provided him the opportunity to work closely with others in regulatory, CMC, clinical supply, medical writing, research, and medical affairs to understand the cross-functional aspects of drug and device development. Next, I'll introduce myself. My name is Renee Roberts, and I'm a senior project manager at PatientWing. I hold 8 years of experience in nonprofit and healthcare sectors, and my specialties include the following therapeutic areas of respiratory, nephrology, autoimmune, and endocrine. And I'm focused on driving high client satisfaction through the successful achievement of study enrollment goals. Passionate about understanding the patient experience, I work closely with individuals to share their stories of living with rare and serious conditions, ensuring that the patient voice remains central to PatientWing's mission. With that, I'm honored to pass over to Chris, who will kick off our webinar by discussing primary sclerosing cholangitis and how Chemomab leveraged strong partners for their phase 2 PSC study.
Okay. Thanks, Renee. To provide some context as we begin, primary sclerosing cholangitis, or PSC, is a rare idiopathic biliary liver disease occurring in 1 in 10,000 people. More men are affected than women, with a peak age of onset for most patients in their 30s. What makes the condition even worse is that 70% also battle concurrent IBD as well. Unfortunately for patients, the current treatment options center around ongoing clinical studies focusing on the reduction of cholestasis and management of disease manifestations and complications. Due to this, patients are quite motivated and active in the disease community, with multiple global advocacy groups providing the networks for patients. Finally, due to the lack of treatment options, the majority of patients will need a liver transplant within 10 to 15 years of diagnosis. Further discouraging is that 20% of transplanted patients will have an occurrence of their PSC. Now shifting to Chemomab Therapeutics. We're a small Israeli company focused on developing innovative therapies in the fibroinflammatory space. Our lead candidate is CM101, an investigational monoclonal antibody targeting a novel chemokine, CCL24. We currently have orphan drug and fast track designation for treatment in PSC in adults. We recently completed a phase 2 study in PSC called the SPRING study, which enrolled 77 patients in 5 countries. I'm happy to report we met the primary endpoint, demonstrating a favorable safety profile. Now we're currently navigating the challenging regulatory pathway based on the lack of hard endpoints demonstrating disease progression. We look forward to moving into our phase 3 study this year. The SPRING study is the subject of the collaboration we're discussing today between Chemomab and PatientWing, and how Chemomab leveraged our partners to achieve study success. When Chemomab first began the study in 2020, it launched in 2 countries, Israel and the UK, with a sample size of just 45 patients. That was, of course, right in the heart of COVID-19. Due to the travel restrictions associated with COVID and limited resources, Chemomab was hands-off and not very engaged with our sites upon study launch. The other challenge Chemomab faced was a crowded PSC space, which had 5 other active phase 2 studies enrolling at the same time. Because of these factors, enrollment lagged for the first year and a half of the study, with only 10 patients enrolled during that period. However, in 2022, Chemomab made significant changes to alter the course of the study. As part of the rescue effort, a new U.S. clinical development team was hired, which led to the following changes. Number one, Chemomab expanded into additional countries, including the U.S., Germany, and Spain. Second, our team hit the road. Someone from Chemomab visited every site, both those actively screening and those that have yet to screen. Each site was assessed, and a deadline for showing progress for those that didn't screen were closed. Number three, we amended the protocol to make it more patient-centric based on patient feedback. And finally, we partnered with PatientWing, Paragon Clinical Research Services, and multiple patient advocacy groups to assist in streamlining the patient journey and engagement. In hindsight, proactively exploring the patient journey earlier would have most definitely helped in the long run, but more on that later.
As Chris mentioned, PatientWing was brought on to partner with Chemomab due to our white glove services and close support of patients and sites. The diagram on this slide highlights the PatientWing patient journey. PatientWing employs a direct-to-patient outreach approach, utilizing a variety of methods to find and engage potential study participants. We develop custom materials, including a study website, which provides information about the study and clear next steps in patient-friendly language. Our materials are translated into local languages so global patients can access the materials in their own language. And we are HIPAA and GDPR compliant, making our services relevant and secure across the globe. Based on our expertise, we customized our PSC recruitment approach in alignment with country regulations. For example, in countries like Spain that did not allow digital ads for clinical trial recruitment, we utilized other methods of patient engagement like advocacy partnerships and our grassroots outreach efforts to support patient recruitment. In countries where all types of recruitment efforts were permitted, we engaged our full arsenal of tools to support patient enrollment. And we openly communicated with the Chemomab team to ensure that they were aligned with our strategic efforts. On the custom PatientWing study website, patients filled out a pre-screen questionnaire based on high-level inclusion and exclusion criteria. Patients who passed the questionnaire were invited to schedule a phone screen with the PatientWing team to further discuss the study and determine potential eligibility. This personal touch point enabled patients to ask initial questions and establish a strong bond with the PatientWing team. For the SPRING study, only United States patients utilized the phone screen, while ex-US patients were referred directly to the research team to speak more about the study. Once patients were transferred to the research site, PatientWing continued to support both parties to ensure that sites provided clear and consistent communication, as well as next steps for patients. PatientWing's approach worked well because of its adaptability to PSC patients and their unique needs, as well as the lingering COVID-related challenges site teams were experiencing, like busy hybrid schedules. Finally, once patients reached the point of enrollment, PatientWing fully handed off the patient to the site for the remainder of the study. The relationships that PatientWing developed with patients and sites were built on trust, respect, and open communication, which were critical to the eventual positive outcomes that we'll talk about in the next few slides. As I mentioned previously, PatientWing created custom patient-facing materials for the SPRING study, which included a study website that you can see at the top of the slide, along with language we could use to engage with patients on social media as part of our grassroots engagement strategy. We also built relationships with patients and advocacy groups early in the content creation process, which allowed us to ensure that our content resonated with those individuals. PatientWing spoke to patients and got their feedback in real time, which allowed us to adjust our materials accordingly. Ultimately, these relationships continued throughout the study, which I'll discuss in a moment. Because relationship building with sites and patient is intrinsic to the work that PatientWing does, for the SPRING study, our solutions help them meet or exceed their enrollment goals by providing pre-qualified referrals. We also took the burden off sites to collect medical records or try to contact patients and ultimately pay phone tag with them, which ultimately gave research teams more time to focus on the work that mattered. For patients, we built strong relationships through our Patient Stories initiative, which invited patients to share their story of living with PSC. And these stories were used to help educate and bring awareness to PSC and provided further awareness of the SPRING study as well. Patients always knew they had someone available at PatientWing to answer their questions and help guide them through the clinical research process. Finally, every patient journey is different, which is why PatientWing also utilized digital ads, which targeted patients who were using keywords in their online searches. This expanded the reach of the study and created an opportunity for patients to find out information that they might not otherwise have access to. When looking at the success of PatientWing, this table highlights the 295 pre-qualified patients that PatientWing identified over the duration of our contract with the Chemomab team. Overall, we transferred 95 individuals to research sites, ensuring that they were able to speak with the research team who further determined their eligibility. PatientWing contributed 15 consents, 8 of whom ultimately randomized. Our white glove services, as well as our patient engagement efforts, were instrumental in supporting patients navigate clinical research and supporting sites and their enrollment goals. As I've touched on, every patient's journey looks different. This is why PatientWing's multi-channel approach was so critical for the SPRING study. By utilizing all of our tools to engage with patients, we reached them where they were at. Whether they read an advocacy group's monthly newsletter, were researching online with Google, or scrolled through a PSC Facebook support group. Each patient was presented with study information so they could make an informed and empowered decision about their health. Also, due to the competitive landscape for PSC studies and the busy schedules of research teams, PatientWing's engagement strategy kept the SPRING study top of mind for both patients as well as sites. Sites can get frustrated when they are unable to recruit patients, so PatientWing alleviated this issue by connecting them with interested and potentially eligible patients. These referrals ultimately kept study coordinators highly engaged in the PSC study. PatientWing also helped identify patients of study PIs who were also qualified for the study, and we further encouraged site teams to continue reviewing their internal pools of patients to potentially identify participants. Finally, one of the most critical pieces of PatientWing's success was the mutual trust between Chemomab and PatientWing. Their team, but specifically Chris, believed in the work that PatientWing was accomplishing, and PatientWing knew that Chemomab would jump in to resolve issues quickly. This trust allowed both parties to do their best work and seamlessly collaborate to deliver success. Because of this, PatientWing ultimately contributed 35% of US enrollments and 14% of study enrollments in just under 1 year. There are some other key partners that supported the SPRING study. By leveraging the partnership of advocacy groups, it was critical not only to the success of the SPRING study, but for the overall benefit of PSC patients. By utilizing approved PatientWing materials, advocacy groups including Albi España, PSC Partners Seeking a Cure, and PSC Support all partnered with PatientWing and Chemomab to spread awareness about the SPRING study. Based on their group's capabilities, patients were notified of the study through a variety of methods, which I've listed on this slide. It's important to recognize the benefits of these partnerships and how they affect each group. The biggest benefit to patients and their care partners was the easy access to clinical study information and clear next steps for how to get involved. Patients also had the opportunity to share feedback and provide insights into the struggles they faced living with PSC.
We also found that advocacy groups are at the forefront of removing barriers found in the development of therapies for complex multifactorial diseases. Advocacy groups hear input directly from patients, but of course they're also working with other sponsors looking to navigate the difficult regulatory pathway. For Chemomab, there were several benefits of partnering. We were able to raise awareness of our mission. We were able to benefit from word-of-mouth referrals for individuals looking for clinical research opportunities, and we gained valuable insights to building more patient-friendly protocols.
One other key partner to highlight is Paragon Global CRS. In our experience, rare disease patients are typically more inclined to travel for research studies because they may have exhausted their local options. During phone screens with patients, we often receive the question, will it cost me anything to participate? Because Chemomab partnered with Paragon to provide travel support for patients, we were able to inform patients upfront that their travel needs would be covered. This allowed them to focus on making the best decision possible for their health rather than worrying about potential costs. For the SPRING study, we observed that providing travel support ultimately led to patient retention. 80% of patients enrolled in the study and 70% completed the study utilized the travel services of Paragon. Utilizing a partner like Paragon alleviates burdens for both patients and sites. As I shared, patients can participate in a clinical study because it ultimately removes the financial barrier for them. And for sites, these services allow study coordinators to outsource the time-consuming scheduling to a travel expert like Paragon. This shift allows the coordinator to spend more time on things that matter, like having patient conversations. Next, I'll discuss the impact of these strategic partnerships. At the end of the SPRING study, Chemomab's total enrollments jumped from 18 patients enrolled in the first 2 years of the study to a whopping 59 patients in their third year. 8 of those patients were identified by PatientWing. This jump from 18 to 59 individuals amounts to a 325% increase in enrollments. PatientWing supported both US and ex-US countries, and I've shared the patient journey here. In the United States, PatientWing conducted phone screens, which provided additional information about the study and further screened patients prior to conducting a warm handoff to the patient at the site. In ex-US countries, we enhanced the pre-screened questionnaire to include additional questions mimicking the phone screen in the US. Overall, PatientWing identified 295 individuals who passed the pre-screen questionnaire. 61 of those individuals in the US passed the phone screen, and 45 patients were warm transferred to the research site. For our ex-US countries, we identified 49 patients, all of whom were connected with the local research team. PatientWing contributed 14% of randomized patients during the year that we were active and 55% of screenings in the United States. The patients highlighted on this slide were identified through PatientWing's engagement efforts, which included digital ad campaigns, strong advocacy collaboration, and social media engagement. Research sites also responded well to PatientWing, with 57% of sites working with our team. These strong site relationships allowed PatientWing to contribute the first consent at 3 research sites and the first enrollment at 2 research sites for the SPRING study.
One of the first questions we're typically asked is about return on investment. When thinking about the SPRING study, there are plenty of successes that could turn into case studies on their own. However, when we drill down, once the team reset the course and the final protocol amendment and leveraged the partnerships we've previously discussed, We were able to complete enrollment 5 months ahead of schedule, which alone is a strong ROI metric to highlight. As we wrap up today's presentation, here are a few key takeaways. Looking back, as we mentioned, our collaboration started as a rescue effort. I don't think I've ever been involved in a study that ends ahead of enrollment plan. So the learning was to be proactive at the start and begin working with partners ahead of time. The initial investment of having custom patient-facing materials, including the study website, is minimal. Utilizing the digital ads is where the budgetary impact can be seen. So used in combination with other patient engagement methods, it's worth it. These materials make patient engagement seamless throughout the duration of the trial.
Throughout our presentation, we've emphasized the power of collaboration. This synergy must occur between all parties involved, whether it's the sponsor working with research sites, sites engaging with patients, sponsors and their advocacy partners or recruitment partners, whomever, all working together. What I found to be the most valuable was the consistency of the Chemomab team and their dedication to their work. We met frequently to ensure sites were engaged with patient referrals. Chris and his team were quick to make decisions and engage when little issues popped up. And our weekly meetings strengthened our working relationship and allowed us to keep patients at the forefront of every conversation we had and every decision we made.
Overall, we believe the sponsor must set the tone for building these relationships. Partners can't drive the commitment to the tools being used. The sponsor must foster the partnership first and foremost. While partner selection is important, the chemistry between the partners must exist. With the PatientWing team, we found face-to-face meetings early in the process were very helpful to build this chemistry. It also helped build trust to allow both teams to get to know each other as human beings. Just being a good partner can't create success, and just being an involved sponsor without necessary skills can't either. In conclusion, Chemomab and PatientWing came together to fix an enrollment delay. Utilizing strategic collaboration and building effective partnerships, we ultimately were able to drive enrollment to completion.
Thank you all so much for listening. This ends our formal presentation, but we do want to open it up for questions and answers. What you can see is at the top of your screen, there should be a Q&A section. You are welcome to submit questions here, and Chris and I will be happy to answer any of those questions that you may have. We'll give everyone a few moments here before we wrap up.
So we need more jokes.
That's on you, Chris.
Ooh.
Okay, perfect. Well, as we round out, oh, perfect. Thanks so much, Whitney, for sharing a question. Whitney's question is, can you elaborate on your earlier comment on the need to have a better understanding of the patient journey? And Chris, I think that's over to you.
Can you repeat the question? I'm just looking,
Yeah.
I can't see it on here.
Okay, exciting. Can you elaborate?
Okay,
can you elaborate on your earlier comment on the need to have a better understanding of the patient journey?
Sure. So I think what we found when we all, at least for the US team coming on, I was kind of new into the PSC space, but realizing that these patients are in fact desperate. They really are. It's a kind of a twisted group in a way, and not bad word in that way, but let's put it this way. I think they're young patients that don't feel terrible, but have a very bleak end in sight in 10 to 15 years with a liver transplant and that sort of thing. So I think there are patients that actually believe they actually have a problem, but it's getting them involved. So we see a lot of that and hear a lot of that with even the patient advocacy groups. So understanding that there's this kind of waning and waxing of patients' need to get to continue to look for different treatment options, you kind of have to deal with that with patients as well. Sometimes they won't think they're in as desperate times as they would have been previously or in the future. So um, that probably wasn't the clearest answer. Sorry about that.
And then it looks like we have one other question here. Do you have experience working with home healthcare vendors as well as concierge, and how effective are they?
Yeah, so we've talked about actually putting some home healthcare vendors into our phase 3 study. They do come with additional challenges as well, for sure. The regulatory implications of having home healthcare agencies and how sites manage that, as who's doing their assessments and that sort of thing, is always somewhat challenging. Some sites are more adept to using them, others aren't. So it's a very large cost to get them set up. So unless you're going to have the lion's share of sites actually using them, they seem more challenging than not. But we have explored that. We might look at it in phase 3 as well. I think that's probably why part of the reason why they kind of come in and out of favor at this point. 2 questions. That's good.
That was great. Any other questions? And I can just say from the patient side of it, depending on the condition as well, and how many treatments people need to go to for the site, it can be helpful to have those options available to individuals, because that can definitely alleviate some of those issues that they have with travel. So it can just make it a little bit easier on the patient experience overall.
It's a new question.
Yeah, one other question. How did patients learn about the concierge service? Yeah, great question here. So during the initial, and Chris, I can take this one if that works for you, but during the initial conversations that PatientWing had with Chemomab, we talked about what would be offered for patients. And so we had that information up front. We were able to include that language in our content because we knew that that was going to be a question that patients would be asking us. Once the study launched, we actually included language on our study website that had information that travel support would be provided for the study. And then during our phone screens with patients, we also included that information in that language that we had, so that during those conversations, when those questions are more typically popping up, we could already alleviate some of those questions or concerns that patients were having around the cost, or how would they get to the site, or how often would they need to go to the site, things like that. And then ultimately, once patients were at sites, they were put into contact with Paragon. Paragon took that burden off of the patient as well as the site, like we mentioned. And we heard really great feedback, I think, both from patients, because they had this offered to them and alleviated for them, as well as sites who could kind of focus on those other tasks that they had going on.
Just to add to that as well, I think it's important to add the concierge service anytime you're going to expand the net outside of the typical area where sites would be enrolling on their own. So to actually have people discover the study outside of regional areas and not have a way to get there probably wouldn't be beneficial at all.
Exactly. Yes, the recording will be shared. So after we wrap up today, everyone who registered will receive an email. There'll be a link to the recording as well as some other follow-up information. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And then Chris, other question for you. Can you share the protocol amendments you made to the protocol?
Sure. So probably one of the most important ones, this was a phase 2 study, and we had a PK assessment at 6 hours post dose. So it was really keeping patients at a site by the time they got there, had their baseline assessments, and went through the whole process. They were basically there for almost the whole day. So once we've realized that the PK assessment wasn't necessary based on the early PK findings, we were able to cut that one back. That was probably the biggest patient-centric piece change we made. We also expanded some of the inclusion, exclusion, or reduced the exclusion criteria to allow a greater number of patients to get reviewed and even in the funnel in the first place.
Awesome. Next question, which ex-US country randomized the one non-US patient? That was Spain. We saw some really great momentum in the ex-US countries that we were recruiting in, from Germany to the UK, Spain. What we ultimately found was our advocacy group partnerships in Spain allowed us to find some patients there, and that patient ultimately randomized. I think this is another really great example of where Chemomab's relationships came in, and how they were doing that on the road journey that Chris mentioned at the beginning, because they were so involved with the sites, ensuring that the sites had everything that they need, especially when working with an outside individual like PatientWing. So Chris, not sure if there's anything else you wanted to share there.
Yeah, one of the interesting parts, although we did enroll a lot of patients in the UK, many of them actually came early in the process. They were like we mentioned, that with one of the first countries. So there was a little bit of a lull in their enrollment. They never really got back in because they enrolled so many patients early. Spain, we originally thought that from discussions with the sites, that they were not going to be able to move patients from one area based on regional care standards. Basically, they needed to get a waiver to move somebody from one area in the country to the other. But even that was overcome and kind of managed based on the excitement of the sites actually working together.
Yes, lots of really great collaboration there. The question around the most effective outreach channel for reaching patients. I think what I really loved seeing, especially for the SPRING study, is it was really all of our outreach methods collectively where we saw success. So we had advocacy group collaboration, saw some really good movement there. We utilized digital ads, which of course in the countries that allow for that recruitment efforts, we found that to be very positive. Doing our grassroots outreach in countries where, again, we couldn't use digital ads was very successful. And so, I can't point to one that was maybe most effective, but they really all worked in concert together, which is why I think it was so successful for the study in particular. Great questions. Okay, we'll give a last call here. If you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. If you have questions after today's webinar, you're also welcome to reach out, and there'll be some contact information in that follow-up email that you receive with the webinar recording too. So can definitely share any questions that you have later on. But with that, I just wanted to again say thank you all so much for joining today's webinar. Thank you especially to Chris for partnering with me on sharing about the success of the SPRING study. It was really a joy to be able to work with you again so closely. And as we close, I do have a few housekeeping items to share. PatientWing is offering a complimentary patient population recruitment assessment for all attendees. So make sure to check your email for details. It'll be in the same email as the webinar recording. And then all attendees will receive a copy of the recording as well. So definitely feel free to go back, take a look, reach out if you have any questions, like I mentioned. And then if you are planning to attend Scope in February, which is coming up very quickly, we recommend that you attend Chris's presentation on Thursday. He'll be highlighting the success of the SPRING study. And so make sure to go ahead and listen to him. And then PatientWing will also be attending. So we hope that you will stop by and say hello. We'll be at booth 1313, so very easy to remember, but would love to be able to meet some of you in person and have some of these conversations with you face to face. So again, thank you all so much for joining. Thanks to Chris and the Chemomab team, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.